Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn Tosfos Dibra Maschal B'Shegeg Lo Konsua. Let's begin. B'Shegeg Lo Konsua. This Tosfos is quite a difficult Tosfos, and for a better and more complete explanation, we'll have that in the flowchart here. Right now, we'll try to keep it as focused as possible. There's various ways of learning the Tosfos. There's a Marshal. We're going to keep to the Marshal's explanation. So let's begin. The background over here is that the Gemara, we presented two brises. They were talking about a case where an individual extended his hand out with an item from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah. One brisa said also lachzir, he can't bring his hand back in. The other brisa said mutar lachzir, we permit him to bring his hand back in. So one of the possible interpretations of these two brises that we presented was the one that said also lachzir was referring to a case where he extended his hand out after Shabbos already began. So he did something he wasn't permitted to do. So there we imposed the knas also lachzir. The brisa that said mutar lachzir is referring to a case where he extended his hand out before Shabbos. Now, although he shouldn't have left his hand out when Shabbos began, he shouldn't have left it out there. But since initially when he extended his hand out, there was no Isser involved, we permit him to bring it back in. The Gemara then said that from the fact that we just explained the brisa this way, we could resolve a question that Rav Bibi asked. How is it? Rav Bibi asked, what's the din if a person placed a piece of dough in the oven on Shabbos by mistake? And later on we'll see that the question also applies on purpose. It'll come up in Tosfos. But for now we're going to focus on by mistake. Placed it in the oven by mistake, and then realized a few moments later, and now he wants to remove it because as of yet, there's no isser that has developed. It hasn't baked. He didn't do the malacha of oifa. But if it stays in the oven, it's going to bake. He's going to have an isser chatos. So he wants to remove the bread. Do we allow him to remove it or not? The problem is that removing bread from the oven is asur d'Rabbanan. So did the Rabbanan remove their isser so that an isser minat shouldn't develop, or do they leave their isser in place even though the isser minat will be a consequence of that? So from the fact that we said that when a person extended his hand out at night, we're going to make it also for him to bring it back in, even though he'll certainly come to drop it. There's no way he's going to hold it the whole Shabbos. So we see that the Rabbanan will put an Isser in place on an individual, even though it leads to an Isser minatera. So to over here, they'll leave their Isser in place, even though it leads to an Isser minatera. The Gemara then went on to say that the truth is we can interpret the brises differently, so that you can resolve the question of Rav Bibi. How else could we interpret the brises? We can say that the brisa that it says also lachzir is referring to a case where he extended his hand out b'mezid. When he did it on purpose, we give him a knas, he can't bring it back in. And the brisa that says mutar lachzir is referring to a case that he extended his hand out b'shegeg. Since it was b'shegeg, we allow him to bring it back in. So that's the part of the Gemara that Tosfos is coming to discuss. So the question comes up immediately: how come we can't resolve the question of Rabbi Bar Abaya? We can still resolve it. We just said that if an individual extended his hand out by mistake, we permit him to bring it back in. So what do we see? We're not going to put it isma d'Rabbanan, since we don't want it to lead to Isser minatera. So for the case of Rabbi Bar Abaya, we're going to remove the Isser minatera so it doesn't come to Isser minatera. So we could resolve the question of Rav Bibi even after we presented this answer. So why does the Gemara start off by saying Lo ilam lo tifshet? You can't resolve the question of Rav Bibi. Sure we can. So it says Tosfos, he explains why it is that we can't. It's referring to a case that he extended his hand out while it was still day. Now you can't resolve the question of Rav Bibi. If he extended his hand out while it was still day, so when we're allowing him to bring it back in, it's not because it's going to be an Isser minatera. There will be no Isser minatera. And the reason we permitted it is because he didn't do any Isser originally. The Isser was that he left it out, but extending his hand out wasn't a problem. So Tosfos explains that when it says B'Shegeg Lo Konsua, it's referring to when it was still in the day. So we just dealt with why we can't learn from Shegeg. Now we're going to look at Mezid, because the same question that we asked by Rav Bibi about Shegeg, the same question could be asked by Mezid. If a person on purpose put bread in the dough in the oven on Shabbos, and then he regretted it. He wants to now remove the bread so an Isser skila doesn't develop. A more severe Isser skila. Did the Rabbanim say, okay, we're going to permit the individual to remove it and remove the Isser that there is, that a person can't take bread from the oven? Or do we say the Isser remains in place even though an Isser skila will develop? Why can't we resolve that from the din by Mezid? What did we say by Mezid? We said that by Mezid, if the person extended his hand out, he can't bring it back in. We made it awesome. So we see that we're not going to allow him to. And the reason okay, let's leave it at that. So it says Tosfos, V'im Taimar, and if you ask, Mishinuya Kaman Nifshet, also from the first answer, and the key word over here that we're going to focus on, based on the Marsha, is Nami also. Not only from our answer of Mezid, but also from the first answer. Earlier, the Gemara presented a different interpretation, that also Lachzira, when can't a person bring his hand back in if it was under 10, and Mutar Lachzira is above 10, because then it's a Makam Tur. We could also answer by the Rav Bibi, the question of Rav Bibi. The lo yitir, that they didn't permit it. They didn't permit the person to take out the bread. The lamatam yud also lachzira. because above Yud, when a person extended his hand beneath Yud, we didn't let him bring it back in. We left the Isser in place, even though an Isser skilla will develop, and so too from our answer. But Mezid, we don't permit it to bring it back in, even though an Isser skilla will develop. So also by Rav Bibi, Lo Yitiru, they didn't permit it, even though an Isser skilla will develop. Now we're looking at the Mezid category. Says Tosfos, so that's his question. We could conclude, we could resolve what the answer to the questioner of Bibi. Now Tosfos is going to hold up his question. Even if you tell me, oh, the Mezid case, just like the Shegig was in the day, also the Mezid is in the day. And the case where it says, Lamatam Yud, beneath Yud, he can't bring his hand back, it's referring to when he extended his hand out before Shabbos. So there's no Isser skilla. That's why they put an Isser, because nothing terrible is going to develop. Says Tosfos, so Pirashti, I already explained, if a person gets a knas for extending his hand out in the daytime, so for sure, if he extended his hand out at night, we're going to give him a knas. He did something much worse. And therefore, it's also going to be at night, the same exact din, and we see, Rabbanan put an Isser on an individual, even though an Isser skilla will develop. Meishlemer could say, says Tosfos, the English that you can't answer the question of Bibi Barabaya. Why not? The Hassam, because over there, this that when a person extended his hand out at night, Rabbanan put an Isser, even though an Isser Menateri will develop, an Isser skilla. Even though it'll bring to a Chiyav Chatas or an Isser skilla. This is because of Midba Ejim. It's only since we made the Knas on him when he extended his hand out of the day, and that's all we wanted to do. But since it makes no sense to do that, to give a Knas to a person who did it in the day and not at night, so we're forced to do it at night just as a result of our initial desire to impose a Knas on a person who did it by day. So in other words, the Rabbanan wouldn't do it just on a person who did it at night. They only want to do it to the person who extended his hand out at day. It's just that once you give it to the individual who extended his hand out in the daytime, you're forced to give it also to the person who extended his hand out at night, because it's senseless to give a knas to the guy who did it in the day, not the one who did it at night. So therefore, we also gave him a knas. The lo shayach tamzeh. It's only because we did it in the daytime where there's no worry about an Isser skill developing. But by taking out the bread, I can tell you they made it mutter. So basically, the second part of Tosfos, what we said is that even if we made the Isser, in the case of Mezid, by not bringing his hand back in, it could be that we allowed the person to take out the bread, even though here we didn't allow him to bring his hand back in. Because by the bread, we don't want an Isser to develop, we're going to allow him to remove it. So over here, how can we have an Isser? It's not that we have an Isser over here. It's just that since we made the Isser for the individual who extended his hand out in the daytime, and if you give it to the person in the daytime, you must give it to the person who did it at night, so therefore we put it on him as well. So to summarize Tosfos, we're going to divide it into two points, the Shegig discussion and the Mezid discussion. In the Shegig discussion, Tosfos said that if the person extended his hand out by Shegig, we allowed him to bring it back in, so you could take out the bread also. So Tosfos explained, no, we allowed him to bring it back in. It's referring to if he extended it out before Shabbos. On Shabbos, we don't know. Either we made it mutter, and then by Rav Bibi it's mutter, or maybe that would make it usher because he did it on Shabbos, and then in Rav Bibi it's usher. So from the Shegig discussion, we have no conclusion. Now let's look at the Mezid discussion. It says B'Mezid, we didn't allow him to bring his hand back in. So if a person put the dough in B'Mezid, we won't let him to take it out. And even if you're going to tell me, no, B'Mezid, we only didn't allow him to if he extended his hand out in the day, but at night maybe we did, so maybe we will allow the person to take out the bread as well. Says Tosfos, we can't say that because we already explained if the knas was given to the person who did it in the daytime, it must be given to the person who did it at night as well. So we could conclude that also there we don't allow him to remove the bread. And Tosfos answers that no, we cannot, because by the Mezid we really only possibly gave it in the day. And therefore we can't learn anything about Rav Bibi where there's an actual Isser skilla. Here there isn't. And this that it's at night, it's not because we gave a knas by at night. It's just that since we did it in the day, and then we cannot do it in the day and not by night, so we're forced to do it at night as well. But if it was just a question of imposing a knas by night alone, we can't conclude from here. Maybe they would have, or maybe they wouldn't have. Same thing there. Maybe we would leave the Isser in place. Maybe we'll remove it. We can't conclude anything.